welcome to our final system-wide virtual roadshow. You have the entire negotiating committee here in Chicago. I'll just go over how the meeting is going to run. We're going to go over some topics to start with, and then after that, we're going to get into your questions so that no one leaves this meeting today without having your question answered. So with no further ado, I will start. I will tell you that all the summary booklets and the voting instructions are being placed in the mail today. So you should start receiving them in time for when voting opens up 6 days from now on July 7th at noontime Eastern time. So let me just go over the compensation areas, and then each of my colleagues will go over a different topic. So retro pay, I will say it, and it's factual. The formula that we have negotiated for retro pay is the highest formula in the industry, and that includes of any flight attendant group or pilot group. Some conversations about the 4% in 2021 and 22. Please remember that actually you probably wouldn't have gotten a 4% raise in 2021 because the company lost $2 billion that year coming out of the COVID, and the following year they only made $750 million. So I doubt you would have had a 4% raise then. It is still the highest of anyone in the industry, and we are confident in saying that to be 100% factual. We did secure boarding pay. Don't forget, boarding pay puts an average 7.5% addition to your hourly rate. For those that are reserves or fly domestic, since you have so much more boardings in your monthly schedule, your hourly rate could be going up 15 to 20%. The base pay rate increase, it is the largest base pay increase for any flight attendant group in the industry. I know people thought it should be higher, but it is the highest in the industry. And that's even comparing to American when they get their raise on October 1st of this year. So it is the industry leading most improvements in a flight attendant TA in the industry. It is $6 billion of improvements, bringing our total contract worth up to $22 billion, the highest by far of any flight attendant contract in the industry. Our 401k increase with our raise is a substantial increase to your retirement. And I will say that, yes, we fought for way more than a 1% raise, but I hope you do understand that when you use your wages that are in the TA with the 1% increase for everyone, regardless of what subsidiary you started with or when you came to United Airlines, for every flight attendant in this TA, it is a 42% increase in the dollar amount that United will be contributing to your 401k retirement accounts. So that's the compensation part, and I'll turn it over to Melinda to go over some of the reserve issues.
Hello, everyone. I'm Melinda Beal, Cleveland-based. Let's talk about RAPs. What are RAPs? They're reserve availability periods. So presently, as you know, reserves are on call for 24 hours. But going forward, when you have a RAP, you are only on call for 14 hours. So let's talk about how you get a RAP. The day before the preferencing run, the company is going to indicate what time and how many RAPs that they need for the next day. But then the preferencing run runs just as it is today. The JET system will run your preferences for your trips just exactly how you do it today. They will assign the trips, they will do the cleanup portion, and then they'll release reserves if they're able. So all of that will be completely finished, and then you can get your RAP. If you are a ready reserve, you will be assigned a RAP. But in order to be assigned a RAP, you must either put on a daily preference or a standing preference. If you put in no preference, you will be assigned a 24-hour RAP. You can also preference to be on a 24-hour RAP. The wrap preference will be released by 7:30, just like the preferencing run. Everybody who wants a wrap will receive a wrap, so there's not a limited amount of wraps. You may not get the wrap you preference for if they have a limited ones, like let's say middle of the day. You may not get the wrap you preference for, but you will get a wrap if you do preference for one. There is also a provision for them to extend your wrap. And if they're planning on extending your wrap, they must tell you 2 hours prior to the completion of your wrap that day. If you do get extended, you'll get 3 hours of ad pay for that extension. Let's see. So if you got assigned a wrap for the next day and you get assigned the present day that we're in, you get assigned a trip that will conflict with your wrap. Your wrap will then be changed or shortened for the next day. So you always complete the assignment for the day before you have a conflict with the next day. So you would still get a wrap, but it may not be the one you were originally assigned. You can also volunteer for an extension for your wrap. And the companies ordering for the extensions of wraps will be to use the volunteers first before they force people into a wrap extension. And did I miss anything, Randy?
I don't think that you did.
So another thing that I see that's under this section is move up lines. If we want to talk about move up lines just for a moment, now you won't have to wait to get your move up lines inside the month. The move up lines will be completed by a preferencing system prior to the month starting. So then you can have full flexibility for the next month in order to change your schedule around.
Thank you, Melinda. Randy, can you talk about the vast improvements that we got in our hotel language?
Yes. Hi, guys. My name is Randy Hatfield. We made a lot of improvements in the hotel language. One of them being 17 hours for a downtown layover. We improved the downtown language to protect our interest in cities that we serve, like London, for example. We don't want to be 40 miles outside of London. We'd rather have the hotel in London. The union has more involvement in the procurement process and how that protects us. In a city like Newark, we necessarily would not want to be downtown Newark. It gives the union and the company the opportunity to work together to find lodging that is suitable for the flight attendants other than downtown Newark. We've also protected the language that the hotels that we do procure have food options, breakfast and dinner. And if you read both of the side letters in the current book and then the new side letter for the hotels, you'll see the vast improvements that we made in the hotel language.
Yeah, Randy, and the only thing that I would add to that is, there's been discussion of why downtown like was taken out. Downtown like was being used by the company to put us in locations that were not the locations flight attendants should be laying over in. So downtown like was not used in the way that it was originally intended. So that's why we went from downtown like to downtown.
Correct.
Joe, can you talk about a little bit about the implementation?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Joe Burns. I'm the AFA General Counsel, and I've been assisting your committee on these negotiations. Yesterday, we published an implementation letter of agreement and also an implementation schedule that's attached to that. And the implementation letter agreement is improved from the one that was in our last contract in a couple of key areas. The first area of improvement is, I think last time there were concerns about, potentially delays in the implementation of certain provisions and what the repercussions were for management. So in this agreement, we have added language that explicitly authorizes an outside arbitrator to award damages in the event that the implementation is being unduly delayed. That would be a determination that the union would bring forward and seek from the arbitrator. But the language explicitly says that the arbitrator can award a remedy to a individual flight attendants or class of flight attendants, regardless of whether they have suffered harm themselves. So that is one provision. The other provision that we put into this letter of agreement is that there will be a quarterly review of the process that's going to include high-level individuals from the union and the company. And the purpose of that review is to ensure that appropriate resources are being put into the implementation. If it's determined that there is a lag or delay in implementation, we'll figure out why. And often the remedy or the solution is to get more resources into programming. So that's what that will do. So just to tell you a little bit about the implementation process, the letter of agreement governs it and states that there'll be a joint team with equal number of members from the union and the company. They're going to oversee all aspects of implementation. They have the ability to talk to the company's programming experts directly and make sure that we're getting accurate information about the implementation. The implementation letter also includes a Appendix A and B, which has details on what are the current projections for implementation. Appendix A lists all of the items which are going into effect on date of signing. And you'll see that the pay components like the wage rates, premiums, and so forth, you will see those in the date of signing, which would be on July 30th if the TA is ratified for the August bid month. Boarding pay is an area that here, as at other carriers, takes programming. It's not something that can be implemented date of signing. You have 27,000 flight attendants who have multiple boardings per month. That is quite a number of transactions, so it has to be an automated process. We were able to push the number down. The company was seeking 6 months to implement it. That's what their IT people were telling them. We were clear that that was too long and needed to get it in quicker. We have agreed on for the December bid month, boarding pay will be implemented. That is a firm date. We have a language in the contract that says it will be paid on that date. So, once December comes, flight attendants can look forward to see, the boarding pay increases that are negotiated there. There are a number of items that we put in the agreement that will be, it says that the JIT will determine them. Those are ones that we wanted to make sure that we had the time for our committee to spend more time with the company's IT people and make sure that we had accurate numbers. Any numbers that we put in at this point in time, we felt might be too conservative. So we've tasked that group within 90 days to come up with a detailed timeline on those items. And of course, we'll be pushing for the shortest possible timeline while still ensuring that they're implemented properly. So we also have in the agreement explicit language that if the parties don't agree on the implementation timeline or any aspect of implementation, we can bring that to an arbitrator and have the arbitrator set the schedule if necessary. So we feel confident that we have the projections that are appropriate for what we know at this point in time, but we also have a strong language to make sure that we can push forward the implementation of these provisions.
Chris, can you talk about the best healthcare provision of any flight attendant agreement in all the areas?
Happy to. Thanks, Ken. So we had some concerns going into these negotiations. Obviously, the company was looking to take some things away from our healthcare. We were able to stave that off. One of the things they wanted to do was the ability to raise premiums and also eliminate certain plans. That did not happen. We were able to stave that off. Another area of concern that kind of raised its head toward the end of negotiations, as many of you are aware, if you've heard some of these talks, was the 480 minimum requirement to maintain your subsidized healthcare. So let's talk about that for a minute. I want to make sure that everybody is actually reading the TA language here, because it's really important that we, number one, be versed in this, and very often the answers are really clearly in the language. So section 29A2G. Let's talk about the two components to the 480. Again, this is something that was a priority for the company. We didn't want it, but what we were able to do was negotiate mitigations for this requirement. So that happens in two ways. The first way is getting credit toward the 480. We wanted to make sure the flight attendants had every ability to get credit going toward that 480. So paragraph 29A2G1, hours to be included will be flight time credit, including but not limited to hours attributable to vacation credit, paid sick leave, bereavement leave, training credit, deadhead, and paid FMLA. I want to emphasize there's no flight credit requirement there. It's not necessary for you to fly, it's just the credit hours themselves. Reserves get either their minimum guarantee of 78 or what they actually fly going toward that 480. And so that's the first component, getting credit toward the 480. The other piece that I think many are overlooking, and it's really important to understand, is there are things that actually reduce that 480 minimum. So 29A2G paragraph 3 says the 480 hours will be prorated for any months or portions of months on an approved leave of absence, paid and unpaid FMLA, furlough, and any leaves protected by a law. So that means if you take a COLA, if you're on a medical leave, even if it's unpaid, that's going to go toward prorating or reducing that 480-hour minimum over the 12-month period by 40 hours for each month that the leave occurs. So both of those things are happening at the same time in some cases. So you've got the proration bringing the 480 down, and then we've got every possible credit going toward whatever that new minimum is. All of that to say, there shouldn't be any concerns for anyone who is actively trying to work, but for some reason cannot, either due to health reasons or leaves that you're taking. For everything else, there is paragraph 29A2G5. So I'm just going to read it because I think it's important. A flight attendant who requires time off due to urgent personal circumstances, for example, family care, that'd be care of a family member, natural disasters, or other personal circumstances which result in a reduced ability to fly, may request a special exemption for that time. If granted, the flight attendant will be credited with 40 hours prorated for that month or portion thereof. So what that looks like is you're going to talk to either your supervisor or your base manager or your base director. If you have a situation that falls outside of paragraphs 1, 2, or 3, that would be a special circumstance. And we took great care in crafting this because we recognize that there's no way that we can contemplate every possible scenario. So this does that, and it protects flight attendants who, for whatever reason, can't fly. If there is a disagreement over whether or not that's to be granted, paragraph 6 addresses that. 29A2G6, the MEC president and managing director of labor relations or designees will review any requests for special exemptions which are not approved by the base. And it's important to realize that the company does not get the final say here. They don't get the veto power. It is a joint decision. And if there cannot be a consensus, then presumably that would go to an arbitrator. So again, the 480 minimum, that's new. It's not something that we wanted. We always viewed it as a benefit. This was a company priority, and they were not going to drop it. And so we tried to make this as all-encompassing as possible. And so if you have questions, reach out to your info reps, your local councils, but this is what the 480 looks like.
And thank you for that thorough explanation, Chris. And I'll just add that everyone sitting up here in the negotiations and the notes that are on the record regarding this 480, there is no one here sitting at this table that has any doubt that we protected medical for when flight attendants need their medical benefits. I will say the only group that would be affected is if you never plan on putting a flight attendant uniform on for no other reason than you don't have to, and you don't have to work flights. And yes, there are some that haven't flown flights in years for no other reason than they can. Yes, the 480 credit will affect you. And that number is so small that I believe every single person that needs their medical coverage will get subsidized medical going forward. So I think we should turn it over now to make sure that we answer any questions. So we will start with the Q&As of questions coming in.
Okay, at this time, we'll kick off the Q&A session of this roadshow by answering questions submitted in advance. Then we'll move on to the live questions. To help us provide clear answers, please send in your questions without adding any comments or opinions. We'll start with our first question from Laura. Are there any provisions for hazard pay for working during a pandemic and wartime?
I can take that.
Okay.
Currently, no. There was nothing negotiated in the contract regarding any kind of hazard pay for any pandemic or wartime.
Yeah. And the only thing I would add to that, Randy, is there are certain times, obviously, everything that's going on in the Middle East, that we have negotiated provisions that aren't in the current contract regarding Tel Aviv. So when the wars were going on, whether in Gaza or then with, different things that have happened, we did negotiate a provision that if a flight attendant felt their safety was at stake or they didn't feel comfortable, they weren't mandated to fly those flights.
And also during the pandemic, the union and the company met daily and was able to negotiate different things and different provisions for the flight attendants to be able to continue flying and no loss of pay.
Thank you, Randy.
Will the company be able to indefinitely delay boarding pay, citing programming issues as they did with piggybacking? Will we be compensated for lost boarding pay due to the company intentionally delaying the programming? From Pamela.
Okay, I'll take this. So we negotiated specific language in the implementation letter itself that states that the boarding pay will be implemented for the December bid month. That is not a target date, that is a firm date. We told the company that we needed assurances that boarding pay would be put in place, and boarding pay will be put in place. And then if somehow it wasn't, the company is going to have to pay because it definitively says that boarding pay will be implemented with the December bid month. So that is that is firm.
From Jeffrey, what new TA language will now motivate the company to expedite the next contract negotiations instead of them being 4+ years? Could you please explain any and all language set forth that will prevent the next negotiation taking this long?
So I'm not even going to place that on the company, so I'm going to place that on the union. Obviously, we work under a 1932 RLA law, which has allowed these corporations and the airlines to drag negotiations. Southwest 6 years, American 5.5, our own pilots over 5.5, and us for 47 months. So if you realize, for those of us that have been in the industry quite some time, back in the 80s and 90s, and even before that, contract negotiations were usually 12, 18 months. And I believe as a union, we've learned a lot how we approach negotiations going forward. So, we have an early opener that starts in July of 2029. Now, the current process how we've been negotiating is we survey you, and then we put in this huge opener, and it has 400 or 500 things that all of you have said is important that you want changed in the next negotiations. I believe our strategy has to change so that we force the airlines to not be able to use the loophole in the RLA to draw them out, because I believe when we survey you next time, we should take the top 25, 30 core issues that you want changed. And when we start negotiations, we're already starting at the core issues that we want improvements on, rather than the 300, 400, 500 improvements that takes time and time and time to get down to the core issues. And that gives the company the time to delay the negotiations. So that's something internally that I believe all my colleagues sitting up here agree with. We'll be speaking to the MEC at this August meeting, because I believe we have to change the way we negotiate to force the company from delaying these contract talks. Because I do believe going forward that negotiations should never take more than a year and a half.
Question from Brittany. Reasonably available is a negative term amongst the membership. Can you please explain reasonable?
I can take this one. So, great question. A lot of people are asking, so why was the language changed? The short answer is reasonably available through our discussions at the table mean exactly what the language means today. There is no change to when a flight attendant is required to be available on their layover. No change whatsoever. Ironically, the company wanted to include that language because I believe it comes from a previous arbitration. They thought it would be more clear to the members. So I find that amusing only because it's been anything but. It's been confusing. It's new verbiage, but its intention is to maintain the status quo and clearly direct that. So just for an example, let's say you are on your layover. You're not required to have a cell phone, number one. It's not a required duty item. You're not required to have your cell phone turned on. But reasonably available means if you're in your hotel room and scheduling is trying to contact you either for an emergency or for an operational need, it's not uncommon that they might contact hotel security, have them knock on your door and tell you through the door, you need to contact crew scheduling. At that point, you've been notified that scheduling is trying to get a hold of you. The expectation would be, as it is today, that you would be getting a hold of crew scheduling. That's reasonably available. Ken always points out a great example. If you want to go to the beach on your layover, are you required to carry your link with you? No. Are you required to carry your phone with you? No. I can't say it any other way. There is no change from the status quo. Do not let the reasonably available language frighten you. There is no change.
Next question from Eileen. What is this I hear about video cameras to watch us as we work?
I'll take that one. During this new TA, there's been a lot of emotions and things are coming out and I don't even know where they're coming from. So Eileen, to answer your question, there is no provision for cameras to watch you while you work. If you have questions like these that seem unusual, make sure that you reach out to your local council or contract action team to make sure that you get the correct information, because it's questions like these that are concerning us, that no provision is like this is anywhere in the tentative agreement.
Why are we not being paid for 3 hours of sit time, Marcos?
And I can take this one. I'm happy to. So a couple of pieces to this. So obviously, we initially tried for an industry first ground pay. And it became apparent that that was not going to be successful. We then decided, let's try for a sit rig, similar to what our pilots have and what American has. Sits longer than 2 hours, sits longer than 2.5 hours would generate a 1-for-2 pay rig. The only way to tell you is the company was absolutely not willing to move on this. At no point could we get them to consider it. I can tell you, we can all tell you, we took this one down to the wire, down to the very last day. We did everything we could to get some sort of a sit rig to recognize the time that we sit between flights. We did get the boarding pay. So remember, boarding pay does cover a portion of the time that we spend on the ground. That's one of the reasons we moved from a 2-hour rig to a 2.5 hour sit rig proposal. So boarding pay, that's industry standard now. We did get that. We've got our foot in the door. We can try again for a sit rig. but I'm telling you, the company flatly rejected the proposal every way that we pitched it. What I do want to include there is, because words do matter, we are paid a rig for all time spent on duty. It's not a sit rig per se, but we are guaranteed 1 hour for every 2 hours that we are on duty over the entire pairing. That rig is always running for reserves, for line holders. So, I mean, our time is protected, but in a different way. So don't think that we're not being paid. That is just one of the rigs in addition to the time away from base rig and the 5, 10, 15 rig. And of course, your actual flight credit time, whichever of those is higher across your pairing, that's what we get paid. So hopefully that answers the question.
From Denise, please explain the out-of-base pickup procedure and the tentative agreement.
I can take that. The new procedure for the out-of-base pickups, they will start 8 p.m. Local time, home domicile time of the trip being picked up. Currently, it's 14 hours prior to departure, so we made an improvement there. I know that some people would like to see that 24 hours. Unfortunately, the agreement that we came to was 8 p.m. the night before.
From Edward, is there any update on jump seat flight attendants assigned to a jump seat having the ability to use crew rest if and when available?
I'll take that one. So in section 3DD9C, there is an update that if you are on the jump seat and the crew rest facilities are available, you are allowed to take the crew rest area. Originally, it came out with the old language to the assigned crew, but that was an error because the company has agreed to strike that. So it has been updated to clarify that flight attendants may use crew rest facilities while jump seating if not in use by working crew.
And that's updated on the website currently.
How does the sunset clause affect retirees? From Scott.
I'll take that. So obviously, you know, Scott Kirby doesn't believe in retiree medical provision for any employer, not just flight attendants. And you know, they kept telling us how the Teamsters is having their retiree medical sunset in 2027. So obviously, you know, the union's position as unionists, we believe every flight attendant should be offered retiree medical coverage. And when that door was shut, that we weren't getting any movement, we tried for extensions to the what's known as the sunset clause. The sunset clause means when retiree medical will end. And it ends different ways for different people. Pre-mergers, United flight attendants have retiree medical coverage, you know, for them and their dependents, and that goes on forever as long as they retire by a certain date. Pre-merger Cal has the bridge from 60 to 65, where they can pay out of sick hour bank, you know, for their coverage, and then if they didn't have sick hours, they can actually pay in dollars for that to get the bridge to 65 and their group, and similar with CMI. But what I will say that what we were able to accomplish because we were battling, and it wasn't even the people we were negotiating with. This came right from the top, from our CEO. He just doesn't believe, and it doesn't affect anyone's job, it affects medical coverage. He does not believe that, you know, flight attendants deserve something when they retire. And we have an entirely different philosophy. So we had to tie the 1-year extension when that's as far as they would go. We had to tie it with something else because the 1-year extension by itself wasn't good enough. So we tied it with a 365-day early opener to begin the next negotiations if this contract, the TA, is ratified in July of 2029, which gives us over a three-year time to still battle that question of retiree medical care. And I will say it's coupled with an answer I gave earlier, how I believe the union can force negotiations to go quicker so that the company can't use the loophole under the RLA law. So I do believe we have time to renegotiate it and tackle this again. And I actually think whoever that next negotiating committee is for the next contract our opening provision should be retiring medical for all flight attendants. I think they're deserving of that, for all the times that they put in, to help this airline become successful.
Our next question is from Asia. Do flight attendants who are currently on maternity leave qualify for maternity leave pay if the tentative agreement is passed?
I'll take this one. So the language on maternity leave specifies that the first 10 weeks of maternity will be paid. So the contract provisions are not retroactive, but we understand that we've been contacted by a number of flight attendants who are maybe on maternity or who have taken maternity leave. The specific question about what happens, like, for example, if you're within your 10 weeks, but you may have already, when the TA has started, there's some scenarios that we're going to be meeting with the company, the joint implementation team, before the ratification date, and, to try and work out some of those scenarios. So we'll have more information coming to flight attendants, but we also need to be clear that, generally speaking, it's not a retroactive provision, but I think, there are some scenarios that we're going to try and work on.
And I actually have been getting positive feedback that the company is willing to discuss these, like, say, someone who went on maternity leave in June and the TA is ratified in July 29th. So.
Great. Next question from Gustavo. I keep hearing this would lock us into a 10-year agreement. Is that true?
Absolutely not. This is a 5-year agreement. And I think if you go back to what I said of how the early opener, don't forget you'll get that 3.75% increase, but we'll be negotiating a full year before the contract becomes amendable. So I believe in the change of strategy and how we negotiate as an organization. I totally believe that statement is false.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think Ken's done a good job of covering, how we need to have targeted negotiations to not allow the employer to delay negotiations under the Railway Labor Act, and how that's very important. We've talked elsewhere about the need to restore the right to strike under the Railway Labor Act, which is essential to collective bargaining. Some of you may have signed a letter last year to Congress urging them to direct the National Mediation Board to revise the standards that they're using to make it easier for us to strike. So I think when you combine those elements, we really need to be in a position to push forward our bargaining and not allow management to delay negotiations. I think one final consideration is we've done a 5-year contract with a 1-year early opener. And part of that was management agreed to an extra raise there. So we're going to be bargaining while we're still getting our final raise, where if we had done a 4-year agreement, we wouldn't have gotten that. We have that. So American has a 5-year deal with no early opener. So hopefully our negotiations will be coming to a head. The Southwest flight attendants have a 4-year deal. So I think we can look forward to all the flight attendant groups coming together at the same time, being able to take on the entire industry. You combine that with Organize and Drive at Delta, which is also very important because that's who the company compares us to. So I think if you put those pieces together, I think we're well situated to really be strategic and take on management. And we should look at this as, we're locking in some victories here. Doesn't mean the fight's over. We're going to be ready to go to war next time.
Does the sunset clause affect subsidiary Continental flight attendants? From Lisa.
Yes, because sunset is sunset, meaning it ends. So remember when I earlier in this meeting talked about we have different plans depending on which subsidiary group you had, but currently Continental flight attendants have what's known as the bridge from 60 to 65 if they retire. And yes, that would sunset at August 28th, 2032, when Scott Kirby is trying to end all kind of retiring medical care in any form for retirees, which I believe we have to fight back against.
Next question from Edward. I would like to know if the letter agreement side letter for jetway trades has been extended to include other international destinations.
There is no change, but I can tell you, Edward, that we have been continuing to have discussions with the company because I don't believe anything prevents jetway trades and international locations. So those discussions are going on currently, even unrelated, but in the TA, nothing changed there.
And that concludes our submitted questions. We will now go into our live questions. Our first question is from Lisa. Can you clarify again, if the contract gets rejected first time around, will we still receive retro pay on the next round of negotiations?
Jerry?
Okay, I'll take that. So if the contract gets voted down, then we need to, the union does a survey, has to figure out what proposals we're bringing to the bargaining table, and we're free to bring whatever proposals we bring to the table. And, I'm certain that our demand would continue to be retro pay. But management is also allowed to bring whatever proposals they want to bring to the table. They get to propose whatever they want. Now, generally speaking, a second tentative agreement has the same overall economics, meaning, typically management's not willing to increase the overall amount of money. And in normal times, they will keep the same amount of money on the table. So to the extent that they've agreed to retro pay in the past, it would be our expectation that would continue going forward. Now, we may fight them and they may not want to increase the total amount. So anyway, so that's kind of the preparatory remark to the final remarks here is, that's all in normal times. We're not necessarily living in normal times right now. There's a lot of instability in the world right now, and in the airline industry in particular. So I think in general, our expectation would be that retro pay was there. But for example, if there's some sort of economic meltdown or something like that, then, the company would have to consider whether they're going to put a $600 million cash payment on the table. I can tell you, I've done this for a while, seen the ups and downs in the airline industry. And I know when we negotiated the last Hawaiian contract, for example, that was done right when the pandemic was hit, and I was very concerned that, what was going to happen to our retro pay. We ended up getting the deal done and protected those payments to the flight attendants. So I think the answer, just to recap it, is, typically the economics are going to stay the same, which means you're probably not going to see much in improvements, but you're also should be able to see the total value that's there, unless there's a change in financial circumstances.
Next question. You spoke about a rig we currently have for sits on duty. What is that? This is current as well, correct?
So I'll go ahead and take that follow-up. I'm assuming that's when I answered are we paid for the 3+ hours sit time? So yes, currently we have a rig in section 6. And that is, I believe, 6A. Let's see. The actual duty rig, I'm looking for it now. To explain, while I'm searching, multitasking is never pretty when I attempt it. But to explain, the current duty rig is 1 hour for every 2 hours on duty. And the way that all of our rigs run is, let's say you're on a multi-day trip. You can't just pick the rig that works best for you on the day that you're flying and capture it. It has to be run across the entire pairing. So whenever we complete a pairing, all the rigs that we have, the 1 for 3.5 time away from base rig, that's run over the entire pairing, the time away from base. Then it's compared with the duty rig. That's what I'm talking about. Every hour spent on duty over the entire pairing is paid 1 hour for every 2 hours prorated. And there's the 5, 10, 15, 20 language that we have for the duty day. And then there's what is actually flown. And then all of those are compared, and whichever one is highest, that's what we get paid. But it's the duty rig, the 1-for-2 duty rig that we do have currently and that continues in the TA.
Question
Yeah, and
from-
just can I just clarify that too, that, just to be clear, that we were proposing a sit rig, sit rig's a little bit different. The sit rig would have paid above the value of the trip, so that's, I think, why we were fighting to get that, but sometimes I think people don't understand that there's also a duty rig that kicks in. But the two are cover the same general topic, but they apply a little bit differently.
And thanks for that, Joe. The minimum duty rigs are section 6A in the TA. 6A1 is the one I'm talking about. A minimum of 1 hour's flight time paying credit for each 2 hours of duty time prorated.
Yeah, and I just want to add, because there's been a lot of conversation about these excessive sit time, and no one up here disagrees that there's pairings that may be legal, but they're not humane and have some excessive sit times in it. So that's why this battle went on to the very end. I mean, I just want to tell you what the other negotiating committee was saying in response to this of why they didn't want to agree. Well, first of all, they believe that the flying is different here in United, and it is. They fly by banks, and what I mean by that is early morning bank, the midday bank, the late afternoon bank, and the evening bank. They fly the operation based on banks. Other airlines, even some of their main competitors, don't do their flying by bank flying. And they believe because that different flying is, yes, there's some pairings that create longer sits. And they also use the costing on from their end of what they thought how much that was going to cost when we were taking this down to the very, very end. And like I've said in previous meetings, when Kirby got to that $6 billion in improvement marks, I mean, the marching orders he had to that side of the table is you couldn't add any more cost over that because he doesn't have that good a relationship with one of the competitors who he thought he was going to be their CEO, and that's American. And he came out of here because he thought he was going to pay the same for improvements as American did, and we stretched and we stretched and we stretched that amount to $6 billion, which is $1.8 billion more. And I know people say, but United's more profitable. They don't look at it in that terms. They look at it as all labor costs. We're not the only labor group on the property, and they weren't going to make themselves uncompetitive having such extreme amounts more in labor costs than their competitors. I mean, that's just a business decision that they made because don't forget, they answer to stockholders, they answer to their board. And we believe we pushed them as far as we could push them. Did we all want that sit rig? Absolutely, we wanted that sit rig. And we believe flight tends to deserve that sit rig. But at the end of the day, it came down to the total value of the contract and improvements that we got, and we weren't able to obtain the sit rig in this round of negotiations.
Next question from Anne. Will we be able to see how many hours we have accumulated towards the 480 hours as the year goes by, so there is no chance we miscalculate our hours and lose the company subsidized healthcare?
I can take this. Currently, right now, the company keeps track of our hours as it pertains to FMLA, and they've been able to secure that and get it up and running. I don't see a problem with them doing that going forward with this. They currently have it projected to start in November of 2026 through October 31st of 2027. So it gives them time to program, and it would go into effect for the 480 for the healthcare year of 2028.
And the Joint Implementation Committee is going to be working with that, with the company to get that implemented. And it's looking like now they won't even be able to start that count should the TA ratify until November of 2026 through October of 2027 for the benefit year of 2028. So the time that the JIT is working on the implementation of that, that's all issues that the union JIT will work with the company JIT, the 3 and 3 members, to see how that's implemented, because obviously if there's a 480 credit requirement, and please remember, it's a credit requirement, not a flying hour requirement. So you would have to have some way of knowing where you were, since there would be a requirement for it. So that's all things that the JIT would work out in implementation.
Next question from Matthew. Is there rest after a wrap, and do other airlines have this?
I'll take that. So the wrap is an availability period, so it's just the time when you're on call. So you could be at home or in your crash pad. It's not an assignment. So there is no rest after a wrap.
And no airline has a rest after a wrap because you're not on duty.
And if I can just add to that, Melinda, some of the confusion surrounding the wraps, I think it's because it's not clear to people that wrap is unique to ready reserves. So you are only going to be on a wrap if you are assigned to ready reserve the night before at 19:30. Once you are assigned to ready reserve, then any preferencing that you did that is specific to ready reserves, that would be ready reserve preferencing, and any wrap preferences that you put in, then those will kick in. Those will then be considered. But another way to look at a wrap, currently everybody is on, when you're converted or when you're assigned ready reserve, you are on basically 24-hour wrap now. You're just, you start and you remain on ready reserve. If you're assigned to ready reserve the next night, then you continue sitting on a ready reserve just through this rolling period. What wraps seek to do is limit that amount of time that you are sitting on call when you are on ready reserve. So you're not on duty, therefore there is no rest that's required between wraps, but you're just not on call. So it's reducing the amount of time that you are subject to being phone available to crew scheduling when you are on ready reserve. It's the best way to.
And just like there's no rest provision now when you're on call for 24 hours, I mean, because you're not on duty.
Thank you. From Donna, is it a rolling 480 hours per calendar year?
I wouldn't use the word rolling. So they start counting in November. They stop counting in October of the following year, so that when you make your healthcare selections in the month after the count, it's for the next year's benefits, whether you have the subsidized medical. So it's always from counting starting November bid period through the October bid period of the following year. That's the count period for the 40.
Yeah, and generally speaking, when you use a rolling period, that's different. That would be a rolling period is any given month you look back back to the previous 12 months and see. So this is not a rolling period. This is a set period.
And Joe, I think some flight attendants might be tying it into something completely different, which is the family FML eligibility. That is on a rolling period going back 12 months from the day it changes daily.
From Julie, why is furlough protection dated May 22nd, 2025 and not date of signing?
I'll take it.
Yeah.
So that's what we were able to negotiate with the company. I think they wanted to know what was going on at the time that they agreed to it. And that's the date that we reached the tentative agreement. I think we looked at it to make sure that we were covering the incoming classes. But that's what was negotiated. I don't think that they were comfortable agreeing in May to what was going to happen a couple months down the road.
Has the time before we go illegal changed? From Amy.
I'll take this one. I'm assuming we're talking about duty max. And if that's the case, then no, that has not changed.
If you volunteer for RAP, will the extra 3 hours of ad pay apply? From Stephen.
I think they're referring to if you volunteer for the 5-hour extension. It's granted, yes, you would get 3 hours ad pay.
From Alejandro, will reserves have the availability to trade trips that they had picked up on days off?
There's been no change to that language for reserves trading trips.
From Jera, is piggybacking in this new contract? And if so, how will the new language affect piggybacking?
Piggybacking is in the current contract and the language is not going to stop the piggybacking in any way, shape or form. We've made no changes to that.
From Lily, does intermittent unpaid family medical leave count towards the credit for 480?
Yes.
So, yeah, and I'll take this as well. Joe, feel free to jump in if you need to. So remember, before we talked about different ways that you can get credit toward or proration of that 480 minimum. So unpaid FMLA, unpaid FMLA, that's going to be a proration of the 480. It's going to reduce your 480. So if you have 2 months of FMLA unpaid, whether it's for yourself or maybe for a family member, which is always unpaid, then that's going to be each month is worth 40 hours proration. So 2 months, that would be 80 hours coming off the 480 minimum. So now in the remaining 10 months that you have, your target is 400 and all credit would go toward that.
Another question about 480. Do training days and CBT subtract from the 480? From Rosemary.
So that's not a proration, that's a credit toward, and training CQ, that training credit should go toward. I believe we had the question about CBTs. That's not credit time, so that would not go toward, I don't think.
Yeah, maybe to think about it this way, you have the requirement on an annual basis to get up to 480 hours credited time. So all of the time that's credited under the agreement will build up towards that 480 and help satisfy it. So that includes your flight time, that includes your vacation, sick time, training time, paid FMLA, any time that has credit attached to it under the agreement builds up towards the 480. Then there's a separate provision that deals with unpaid time. So if you're on an unpaid leave of absence, time that you don't have credit attached to, but you're on an authorized absence or leave from the company, think of it that way, that's going to lower the 480. So both things can be happening at the same time. You have credit that's building up towards the 480, but you're also having your unpaid leaves reducing the 480. So for example, if you're out on medical leave for 6 months, that would reduce the 480 by 40 hours a month. So you'd be down to 240. And then all your credited time that you're earning, your vacation time and so forth goes up towards that to satisfy what is now your requirement, which used to be 480, but it's now 240. Hope that made it clearer.
From Susie, if this tentative agreement is not ratified, can you approximate how long it will be until we have a new one?
Okay, I guess that's mine to answer. And you know, by way of explanation, I've been bargaining in the airline industry for 25 years with AFA, but I've also bargained in other industries. But and have a fair degree of experience with this on working with TAs that fail from time to time. So let me talk to you a little bit about what the process is if a TA was not to be ratified. If a TA is not ratified, we have to figure out why it didn't ratify. We have 27,000 flight attendants. Just because you may not like one particular provision, you may have voted yes or no on it on the TA based on that. Doesn't mean that everyone shares your views. So the committee would have to get together, would have to put together a survey to the membership. And that survey would try and figure out what were the key issues that prevented the TA from being ratified. Once we have the survey results together, the committee would have to get together and figure out what are gonna be our demands, our proposals going in. Normally, and this is something that the National Mediation Board would encourage, normally, we go in with a very targeted list of issues. You certainly don't wanna go back and negotiate another 3-4 years, and the mediation board's not gonna put those type of resources into it. So you really have to spend some time putting together what your proposal is. Then that has to go in front of the Master Executive Council. And usually the National Mediation Board wants the union basically to get our act together, so to speak, wants us to have a plan about what we're gonna bring forward before they're gonna schedule dates. They're usually gonna wanna talk to us before we go back to the table. The negotiations remain under the supervision of the National Mediation Board. Then at that point, you have to seek dates from the mediation board. And our experience is that the mediators are busy the earlier in it is in the coming months, because they've got other cases that they're working on. So they have to fit us in their schedule. We have to deal with the company. I think it's fair to say that we could plan on, I typically tell people just to get back to the table is probably about 6 months. If you have a real willing employer who's willing to meet without the mediator, which I can say is not United Airlines, that's not how they've typically approached it, then you might shave a little bit off of that. But I think that's a good benchmark. I think we can look at, Alaska Airlines, even where they had the company really wanting to push it forward because the merger had been finalized with Hawaiian. It still took them 6 months before they had a new ratified TA, and that was where the employer really wanted to move things forward. It took Southwest 4.5 months for a new TA, but they met without the mediator. So anyway, it's a long answer about how you get back to the table. But then the question is, you're back to the table, then what? Then you've got your new set of demands. You're going forward to the employer, but the reality is, the reasons and the conditions of bargaining, may not have changed, and the employer's position typically doesn't change. So in terms of the overall economics, we're still doing pattern bargaining. They're still gonna look at where we're at in the industry. And our pretty clear experience is that the employer does not somehow magically bring a new pot of money to the bargaining table and increase the offer. There's, so for example, the Alaska flight attendants voted down their TA, and that was certainly, I think they wanted to do that and send a message. They voted their TA down, but the second TA, the finances were pretty similar. They got a 25% increase at the top step.
25 cents.
25 cents. What did I say?
Not
You said
25%.
25%.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
A quarter, 25 cents.
Yeah.
That's
Big difference.
a big difference.
That
A
would-
25-cent raise at the top step. So they were able to fix a couple other things. They got improvements in the boarding pay formula, but you also have to remember that if you're negotiating a contract 6 months or a year down the road, the companies save, in this case, it's $500 million or so. So then you go back to the table and you have to bargain things out, and you got to ask yourself, well, what's really changed? Is the company's position going to change on these major issues? We can tell you for a fact it's not going to change on having a 480 requirement. Not going to change on having electronic notification, and then some of the big economics, sometimes negotiations becomes moving the money around. So I don't know, we can't say how long it would take to get a new agreement, but it certainly would not be a matter of weeks or even months. Like I said, probably 6 months to get back to the table, and then it's however long you're gonna try and fight it out, and at the end of it, we can't and no one can guarantee that it's gonna be fundamentally different in terms of the economics.
Question from Lauren. I have a huge problem with needing to check CCS so often during a trip. Why was this allowed to be added into the TA?
I'll take that. So it became very evident during the meeting that the company wanted electronic communications. And the other carriers have also been moving towards this. And in many of the provisions in the contract, we point out to the company that the other airlines have it. And this was one of those things that they pointed out to us, that the other airlines have it, and they were very insistent in wanting to move forward. They kept telling us, our big joke is that they're trying to getting out of the phone call business. And they would like for us to use our electronic means in order to get updates and information on your trip. With that said, the back and forth, it was lengthy. They wanted even more. You think that we have a lot of provisions for checking CCS now. You should have seen it when it first came out, and we were able to fight back some of the things that they were asking for. Additionally, even today, when you go to check in, often when your flight's been delayed, they try to change your check-in time. And invariably, usually yourself or your union rep is on the phone arguing with scheduling that, they're just about there, they are there, they're in the airport, you can't change it. So even though we didn't necessarily want the 2 hours and 15 minutes, we were trying to make it more, and that we ended up on the 2:15 as a compromise. Company wanted 90 minutes. At least now we have a hard time when if your flight delays within that 2 hours and 15 minutes, they cannot change your check-in time. So that does adding that language in the new TA does allow a layer of protection for your check-in time when they're trying to change it very close to your check-in time.
And I actually believe it stops all this flight attendants for having to be hours and hours on hold with the scheduler, because don't forget, right now you have to have two-way contact. So I believe that goes away. I believe what goes away when you're actually, at your home base there, you don't know, can I go home? What are they doing with me? Because nobody can reach the scheduler. I mean, you have to realize this is all under loss of flight time, that checking CCS. So it's that your flight isn't operating, or that you got there and your flight's already gone. So it's only for loss of flight time. So having to check CCS, and it was presented to us at negotiations, the tens of thousands of times that flight attendants are checking CCS. And of course, there's no requirement now to do it, but they know you've been doing it. So it's not like they don't know that flight attendants aren't checking CCS now, but it's 2025. We've moved past the beeper when I started to the phone. And now we're going to electronic communication. And I believe we really strengthened the reassignment language under 7Q. Read all of 7Q. It's clear and concise. No muddy language. Everyone knows everything. And read 7Q 5 LOA letter in the back of the TA. And I definitely believe that now that the cancellation of a flight starts, the second a flight is canceled, a 4-hour clock starts. That doesn't exist today. That is a huge improvement for FlightFast.
From Talia, is there any language in the tentative agreement to include any extra pay if the company fails to get us a hotel within a certain time?
Read that one again.
Yes, sorry, I missed it.
Is there any language in the TA to include any extra pay if the company fails to get us a hotel within a certain time?
So currently in our contract, we have the ability to self-help after 30 minutes. So that language never changed. If the company hasn't provided you with the hotel within 30 minutes of contact, you're able to self-help and concur those expenses.
From Shelley, can management ride the jump seat?
They can ride the jump seat today. It's in our current contract,
But after flight attendants.
but always after the
Always
United
after
flight.
CJ.
United flight attendants. The only thing there's so much misinformation about our jump seat. The only thing that changed about the jump seat language is, first of all, United flight attendants have priority over our jump seat. Management has always had the right under the current contract. If they had to send for any reason, I mean, they have that today. That's no different in the TA. What did change in the TA is now we can enter into actual agreements with other airlines for their flight attendants to sit on our jump seat if it's available after United flight attendants having priority. But it actually helps our flight attendants because we can now negotiate with other airlines for United flight attendants to sit on the actual jump seat. There is no other work group at United that can occupy our jump seat. None of that changed, but it did open up provisions for United flight attendants, especially our commuter flight attendants, to have these agreements where you can actually sit on the actual jump seat of other airlines.
From Susan, why was the profit sharing formula not changed to profits in calendar year instead of difference between year X and Y?
That came down to just a costing issue. And yes, we tried to change the formula. And don't forget, we never got complaints about profit sharing until this last year because, coming out of the pandemic and they made so much money that year before that they didn't make the threshold this year, so payments were lower. And this is the year that we started getting all the complaints about profit sharing. But that formula worked in the past. And although we wanted to change it to make it even better, we were not able to get it into this TA. And that came down just to a costing issue of where we had to move the money, because don't forget, our view was we had to get it in wage rates, we had to get it into compensation, because profit sharing you only get if the year is profitable. And we had to make that decision at the time because of the value of changing the plan. Now, I can tell you the forecast that has been put out for United of what the profits were supposed to be going forward for this year comes out to a higher percentage than we got last year in profit sharing. So, unfortunately, we couldn't change it based on the cost. And we thought it was more important to put it into your compensation and into the retro payments that they owed you for the back years.
Next question from Lynn. Did union reps get a 30% pay increase in this tentative agreement? For example, more hours guaranteed per month.
It's just so ludicrous, okay? We get paid the same as flight attendants. I don't know where these rumors are starting, okay? Absolutely not. Actually, sometimes we get paid a lot less than flight attendants.
And I'd like to point out that Melinda sitting next to me, yesterday was her last day of being council president for Council 63. And she's going back to the line. So I would never see Melinda negotiating something she's not going to get the benefit of. So that's just absolutely absurd. There was no provision for extra hours for union work.
Next question from Aaron. With no sub basis for purser, is there still going to be a 50-hour minimum?
That is the whole reason that we took away the sub-base requirement. Pursers will now enjoy the ability to bid either a purser line or a domestic line, as long as they can hold either. And it takes away the requirement, and it also takes away, you can only opt out twice a year. It's a huge improvement for the purser base.
From Gina Marie, do disability states such as Colorado or California count toward 480?
Yes, all state laws covered count towards the credit for the 480.
From Lauren, I'm happy to see that other airlines are now counting as one of the flights qualifying for the commuter clause. My question is, do loads matter for that flight, and how would we prove this?
We talked about it.
We did, yeah, and I believe it's actually in the language. Let's see, commuting on other airline. I think it's right in the language. It will be the responsibility of the flight attendant to provide the necessary documentation to show the available capacity. That's section 28B 4B2. 28B 4B2.
And there's these non-res sites where you have the colors and everything that counts as showing it. You could have a friend, there's boards that different flight attendant groups share what the boarding is.
The listing
so
page.
All that is the documentation that we're talking about.
Screenshots.
Screenshots of it. And that was directly talked with the company. How do you provide that?
Question from Crystal. Will we receive boarding pay in December for November flying or paid in January for December flying?
It starts with the December bid period, so you're getting paid for all the December boardings that you do, and obviously you know how our pay is. That would come out of the January 16th paycheck, but you're getting paid for the boardings in December.
Question from Freddie. Are there any changes to short notice sick calls regarding points, and what has happened in the last year?
There's no changes to the language for the short notice sick call, and you receive attendance points as you do today. The only change in attendance points was that for occupational injuries, there'll be no more attendance points.
Question from Martha. Will I get points for OJI still?
Absolutely not. That goes away in this TA.